This meeting is being recorded.
That's never happened before. Anyway, welcome back to another episode of the Kickleball Podcast. I'm your host, Danny Lang, and today I have the Associate GM and Academy Director of the Northern Colorado Hailstorm, Mr. Kevin Ireland. Mr. Ireland, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm very well, Daniel. Daniel, thanks for having me.
Of course, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad we got to have something just organized together and be able to have a good conversation just about soccer and everything.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so I saw a little bit of your interview with the Insiders Lounge, and Chad MacArthur's a close confidant of mine. I really appreciate just being able to talk back and forth about interviews. He's someone I really look up to, at least with media in regards. And so, admittedly, he did take a lot of the questions I was going to ask you. I'm messing around, but um, but I would love to just hear just for our own Kickleball viewers who'll be tuning in. But if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear your first beginnings in soccer. And I know we talked a little bit about it off the break with Celtic, but yeah, I'd love to hear for it now, my friend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it was enjoyable being on Chad's podcast. I think I'm in my soon to be in my podcast era, so yeah, might be hearing some of the same stuff, but it's all
No
good.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up in Scotland, small village in Scotland, right outside a place called Kilmarnock, which actually has a professional team that plays in the Scottish Premiership there. So soccer, football over there is just it's ingrained in the culture. So we're playing football all hours of the day, all hours of the evening. Start playing at 4 years old. Start playing your local club, which probably the equivalent in the States is travel soccer. So started playing just local friends. The dad was actually the coach of the team, and then get to a certain age where you need to be progressing on, or you get to a level where you've sort of outgrown grassroots soccer or competitive soccer. So I ended up joining Celtic's academy, which is probably one of the biggest in Europe. Stayed there for a couple of years and ended up bouncing around a few other academies, and ended up the town that I mentioned that I'm from, Kilmarnock. They actually have a local rival. Ayr United is the name of the club. So Kilmarnock and Ayr are like two pretty big towns in the west of Scotland. So at U19, I ended up signing for Ayr United. Pushed my way into the first team squad from time to time. Had a few games there, and then at the time they were actually playing what would be sort of like a second, still professional soccer, but a second tier. Actually had, funnily enough, they had American owners who were spending quite big money to try and get them back up the league. So I looked around me at 19 years old and said, they're bringing guys down from leagues above to make the team better. I'm a young boy. I don't know if I'm going to be able to push past these guys. So I started looking at the college route, and funnily enough, I played in during this time I was playing. I think it was like a reserve game for United, and somebody approached me after the game and said, "Would you have any interest of ever coming to the States?" And just sort of snowballed from there.
So tell me about your college soccer career though too, and then ultimately how it ended up leading you into. Oh, actually, I guess we'll say this now because I'm sure you've got stories on stories like all these other college soccer players I get to talk about. But tell me a little bit about that experience. Where were you at? What were your first tastes of America as well though too? Because I gotta imagine it was your first time staying an extended period of time. What was your welcome to America?
Yeah, I think my first taste of America. I don't know if I can talk about it, but no, I'm only joking. So I ended up in a place, West Palm Beach, Florida. Never really knew. I never did much research on Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. I think I got a few places pitched to me. I think I talked to Chad about this. Like one was Wisconsin, then the other one was Syracuse, New York, and then the other one was West Palm Beach. I've it's a young 19-year-old boy in Scotland looking at that. Yeah, I see all these three are presenting. Like, okay, West Palm Beach. That sounds like the place,
Yeah.
the place to be. Didn't really know. Like I say, if I in hindsight, if I look back, I'm probably the other two were Division One programs. Palm Beach Atlantic was a Division Two program at the time, but that I say I hadn't done enough research to know what each meant. And then as time's gone on, and I realised that there's a lot of good D2 programs out there that give D1 programs a run for the money in certain regions. So ended up heading over stateside, and I don't know how my mum let me do this, but I landed in Miami, and I took a train. The first time I've ever been in America.
Yeah.
So I was 19. I took a train from Miami to West Palm Beach. It was late at night. It was definitely past 10 p.m. and we're just going through the stop after stop after stop. The college soccer coach is actually going to pick me up in West Palm Beach, but I'm thinking, it's going to be a 20-minute train ride or whatever. Obviously, it's like turns out it's somewhere between an hour or 2 hours. And the later and later it starts getting in the evening, people, you can imagine when it's 11 o'clock at night, who's coming on the train, who's getting off the train. So you asked for my first taste of America. Some guys come on the train, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm praying that my stop's coming up soon. And this guy comes up to me, he's trying to borrow my phone, but obviously I'm trying to explain to him, like, oh, my phone, he's trying to call somebody, and I'm trying to explain to him that my phone won't work here. It's from United Kingdom. I don't have an American phone. I don't actually think he's buying it. And then like I said, I tell my buddies this back in Scotland is one of my first stories. I'll never forget. He introduced him. He said, "What's your name?" I said, "Kevin." And I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Easy." I was just like, oh, jeez, I don't know, I don't know what I've walked into here, but luckily enough, I made it to West Palm Beach safe, should we say?
Okay, very nice.
Yeah.
And
Probably not the story you were expecting, but
not at all, but you know what? I don't know what really to expect when I do some of these interviews. I'm always surprised by something that comes up in the story, but I'm glad you ended up getting home safe. For talking about this story. But um, and then so tell me a little bit about the environment in college soccer and how that was maybe different from your academy background in Scotland and what maybe that looked like. How soccer's not the first sport in America where it's obviously a little bit different in Scotland, but making that adjustment not necessarily for popularity's sake, but maybe the different styles of play and how you ultimately grew to become an effective player.
yeah, no, I can touch on that at a few different angles. So um, in terms of the environment you're coming into, like facilities, even level of coaching, um, the people you're going to interact with, like this coming in a college soccer environment in the state, I'd say the States is higher than a lot of academy programs in the United Kingdom. The resources these college programs have um, to throw their programs is, I tell young boys this in Scotland all the time, like you're going to be surprised what you walk into. Like I saw it over a 5 year, so I spent 5 years around the college soccer team in West Palm Beach, and facilities were good on in my first year, but the 5th year they'd moved to a new complex. You've got a locker room, everybody's got their own little area in the locker room. You've got a foot tennis court set up in the locker room. The academies in Scotland, like unless you're at Celtic, Rangers, some of the other big ones, like if you're playing at a championship academy in Scotland, guaranteed the facilities are better, and what not just the facilities, sorry, like the gear they're giving you, um, in college soccer, like the money they're spending on you for your tracksuit, your jersey, your cleats, like yeah, it's just night and day between what you get from college soccer pro and what you get academy pro. In terms of the actual level, so I played with a lot of like our program was made up of a lot of Europeans, South Americans. I'm probably gonna say something pretty controversial, but the Europeans and the South Americans are not controversial. I think this is well known, but maybe something people won't like is definitely the Europeans and the South Americans are the more technical players, and then the Americans are the athletes. Uh, the workhorses in the team. Uh,
Mm.
that's just what I found across the board. I don't obviously I've been away from the college game a while, but that's my experience. We always used to play. We always used to play USA. Like the Ryder Cup, we used to play the USA against the rest of the world in training. Um, and the rest of the world always used to win. Put it like that.
Well, you know what though? I mean, I think a lot of this, at least with the conversations that I've been able to have about this kind of topic, it definitely seems like it's something that has maintained a theme at least now. The American
Yeah,
players tend to be the technical aspects of the game don't tend to be as stressed as early or as young as they are, at least with some of these other international players end up coming into college soccer, and I think it definitely shows at least with the juniors and seniors and a lot of these other top programs though too, and some of them have even made a brand around it, like Missouri State and Hofstra and Marshall,
yeah.
and teams that have built their brand around the international base.
Yeah, no, 100%. And don't get me wrong, only having a bit of fun, with the comparison, but the
Right.
gap is closing. The gap is 100%. I'm talking. I played college soccer now 10 years ago, so I do think that technical gap is closing. So
Yeah. And I'll be honest, you don't look a day over 30, to be completely honest with you. I really wouldn't have.
yeah, and I appreciate that. But yeah, no, I've been out of the college game for a while.
Huh. So, and I want to ask a little bit though too. Like, it takes a special kind of player, and I think it really comes down to being a person that really understands their role, but how most of the other positions end up working out, at least on the pitch. And so, I want to ask you about the move into coaching, at least on your end, or at least broadly about the front office move that you've been able to make at least over time. But I'll ask a little bit about like to coaching for now. But you know, again, it takes a very specific kind of person and player to be able to make that transition. When did you realize that that was your calling?
Yeah, so I would say, we Palm Beach Atlantic, it's a Christian university. We used to do a lot in the community, and we'd always do it through soccer, so go into communities and coach. But so that was my first real experience with young kids. I actually did. I was on the staff. My after the year after I graduated, I actually stayed at Palm Beach Atlantic as an assistant coach.
Mm.
Um, that's sort of where I was obviously coaching collegiate athletes. But I would say probably what held me back there was you're talking about the transition. The transition was tough for me because I actually played with a lot of the guys that I've now crossed the line from playing. So what happened was my coach, my senior year, my spring senior year, the coach who had coached me for my 4 years, he ended up moving to Liberty, and so a new coach came in, middle of spring. Um, I end up staying on as a bit of like a bridge between the old group and some new players he had brought in. But like I say, the challenge for me was I had played with 90% of the squad, apart from all of the seniors that had graduated at the same time. I was probably the only one that stuck around the area, um, and I'm right in that environment still with guys who, uh, you know, I would I would share the field with. We'd train, we'd play games, we'd go out, and it's tough to cross that line. And now, you know, um, being that coaching figure or whatever, so um, that's probably. I also to tell you where I'm going with that. I also coached in the youth space at the same time, and between the college game and the youth space, I was loving the youth space more. And I think if I look in hindsight, when I look back, I probably was loving it more because um, I had a bit of freedom to do, what I wanted to do, and I didn't have uh, the spillover from being a player with these guys. I think if I went back into the college game now, it'd be a bit different.
Sure. And it's always something that ends up going through. I mean, I imagine that a lot of the guys that end up, or at least with people that you've gone through, or at least youths that you've worked through, have either gone that college route or looked to explore more professional opportunities, whatever it ends up being. But to talk, I think a little bit more about the youth thing. I know you were telling me we were talking the other day. We had an interview scheduled the other day, but then you know Danny, I gotta go pick up a few games, and I thought
Yeah.
that was fascinating just because of how, you know, volatile that it may end up being, and just understanding, okay, well, look, we've got to fill in these holes. I've got to figure out, I've got to fill in this opportunity to go coach. I'm gonna go do that. And so, I'll ask you a little bit about this later, but tell me about, maybe some of the inner workings that we don't necessarily see, both with your role as an academy director, but also as that coach, seeing both the front office and that on the pitch end of that. I'm very curious.
Yeah, no, 100%. You sort of asked me, what I do on a day-to-day basis. I think when the season's in full swing here, it's a little bit of everything. When I was first hired by the general manager, he sort of said to me, obviously we want you to build our academy, but he said we also want you to help us elevate soccer because the way we're structured here in Northern Colorado is we actually own a baseball team as well. Our ownership owns a baseball team, men's team, women's team. So there's a lot of moving pieces on a daily basis, and so sometimes things can get overlooked. There's a lot of different areas taking people away from things. So yeah, he said just come in and we want to build that academy from the ground up and right through to our first team on the men's side. Same for the girls and the ladies side, but also we just want to how can we intertwine with the community. How do we build our fan base? How do we do all these things? And so I'll never forget he said to me, help us elevate our soccer programs on our complex. And yeah, I think we've done that. And yeah, no, the other night, like you say, we the I had to jump to some coaching sessions, and that's it's learn a lot in the front office, but my passion will always be on the grass. Like this was actually a winter academy that's going on right now, just kids from 9 years to 19-year-old, all different levels, and yeah, I'll just jump in and coach. Yeah, I'll coach anybody. So that's what took me away the other night. So.
And I just messed around with that a little bit. It was a fun little thing that I got to segue through, but
Yeah.
I don't. There's no sore feelings on that at all. I really promise.
No, no, 100%. I think, and to go a bit deeper on that, I think sometimes if the front being in the front office and the daily grind, it can be a lot, and so just getting out on the pitch and just coaching and something you love, it just sort of it's a stress reliever.
So how did you end up coming into this position? What was the journey like post? Or I imagine it's very quick though too. Only really a few years. I imagine, I guess. But um,
Sorry, no, actually, I'm doing myself. I'm losing track. I'm actually losing track of the years. I know you give me a compliment on my age, but so yeah, no, graduated 2014. So yeah, 10 years. So it has been. Yeah, you're right. It has been a quick. So during that time, when I was coaching as an assistant coach in college, I was also working in the youth space. So I was sort of going side by side. So I was able to. It has been a short space of time, but I've been able to build up pretty quickly. But sorry, to go back to your question. Sorry.
No, yeah, no, I really just at that, what that transition was looking like, over the last 10 years. I mean, as much as, I know that there's a lot that goes into that, but, what's it look like and ultimately taking a Northern Colorado job?
Yeah, no. So it's been fun. During that, like I say, when I was had the comparison right out of college, coaching collegiate athletes and then coaching the youth. I'm, loving the youth space, and it was actually my first time probably really investing my time in the youth and like on a regular basis. And uh, the local youth club I was at the time were um, they were sort of I say falling to pieces. Like it was a club that had been big in the past. It was had shrunk to quite a small club. I think they only had 6 teams at the time. If youth clubs, they sort of pride themselves and look how many teams we have, and also 6 teams. You're like, geez, like one bad step, and this program doesn't exist anymore. So they said, "Oh, would you be interested in being our director of coaching for the program?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So I still had some buddies in the area that were obviously college players, and we were local to this youth club, and so I started bringing them along to coach teams, and we over time we grew it up. I think that's when I sort of shifted away from the college game to focus on the youth club, and I think I'm quoting teams here, but maybe we had 60 players at one point. By the time it was said and done, we were 6 or 7 times that size in the space of, I'd say, 3 years. And yeah, it really just came down to this will be my theme. Like from wherever I go, like the people you bring in are that really makes a difference on how you're going to build something. You bring in the right people, everything else just falls into place. Um, and so, like I say, I had built this club with some really good coaches, and um, I had a I still had a buddy that I brought in. He was a English guy. He'd come over to do his masters in strength and conditioning. So I actually brought him in as our strength and conditioning coach to the youth club, and he was coaching a couple of teams. And probably after about a year and a half, he told me he was moving to New Zealand to pursue his doctorate. And so probably about we always kept in touch because we had the same philosophy on soccer and how things should be done. So maybe a year down the line of him being in New Zealand, he messaged me and said, "Hey, look, I'm actually working with a club in New Zealand. They're actually looking for a director of football. Told them about yourself. They're really interested. Would you be interested in it?" I know I'm repeating myself about this because the thing I always say to people always ask me why New Zealand. I think honestly, if you're growing up in a place like Scotland, like the US and New Zealand are probably two countries that if you ask somebody in Scotland, where would you like to travel to? I say I'll probably go to the US, New Zealand. I'm trying to think of anywhere else. Those are probably two that are on everybody's bucket list because New Zealand is always perceived as such a unique place. So I jumped on a Zoom call with the board there, and so I had it off. And I think 2 months later, I was in New Zealand. Things just sort of fell into place, and again, it was similar to the club that I'd been at the youth club in Florida that I'd been at previously. It was a rebuild. So what their situation was, they had so every club in this New Zealand is quite a unique soccer market. So there was only one at the time, one professional soccer team in New Zealand. It was the Wellington Phoenix. There's now two. Auckland FC just launched. They're actually owned by I think it's the same owner as Bournemouth or Chelsea, but they just formed Auckland FC. So they now have two professional teams that actually play in the Australian A League, and so New Zealand, the soccer leagues in New Zealand I would class them as semi-pro, but they're run quite professionally. Players are players are paid, maybe not training as much as pros, but people come watch the games on the weekend, so it's a pretty good environment. So the club that I was brought on as a director of football to, they had just been relegated. They'd been in the top league for years, and massive club, massive youth space as well. But they were putting a lot. What they realised was they were putting a lot of their resources to the first team, and none of it was going to the youth. So I guess what was appealing um, to them of me was, can this guy come in and build our youth programs up? Let's start putting all our resources down there so that we don't have to, pay an ex New Zealand national team player to come and play for us, and we put our money in them. Let's build from the youth, and so it's funny, they're actually reaping the rewards of that now. Some of their kids are off playing, professionally, and they've got some good teams coming up. But I was pretty fortunate. I was really quickly I established. So pretty much New Zealand is what I liked about New Zealand. It's maybe not as relevant here in the US is the New Zealand Soccer Football Federation will come in and judge your program on uh, you know coaching qualifications, curriculum, facilities, all these things. And if you can pass this, if you can show that you have all these things in place and you're developing soccer players, they'll award you what's called a talent development program, and pretty much that means that you have the federation's endorsement. Like that, if you live in this region, you should be at this club because they're going to develop you as a soccer player. Don't really see much of that in the States, like it's like the Wild West for like soccer clubs. Like you can have an unlicensed coach out there, you can be training in a public park. Like I'm not knocking all that stuff. I'm just saying there's standards put in place in New Zealand, and it sort of made me a better director, knowing that I had a sort of there was accountability on me to stay in these lanes and build the program this way. And so I was actually fortunate. I was able to put together um, what's called, like I say, a talent development program, and that's for 13s through 19s. And then I was also able to get accredited for a player development center, which is 9s through 12s. Um, and so that we got awarded those two in the first year I was there, and players just started flocking to the club. So having those obviously helped. So and don't get me wrong, like I have to give him a shout out. So the guy that brought me over in New Zealand, he actually works for FIFA now, in their talent development program with under Arsene Wenger. So I had a bit of, I had a bit of help. Don't get me wrong. He's one of the highest level uh, minds in soccer I've actually met. So yeah, I had a bit of help from him.
So now when you go into this new environment and it's a completely new slate where you really don't have maybe you had your one or two connections, but at least with these academy with this development or at least just bringing this academy, bringing it back up essentially, what were the first steps that you were able to enact and what do you think were some of the things that you did that were most successful? And they could be two different things or they could be the one and the same.
No, I mean it's the same as honestly it's the same as like I said in Florida. I obviously had a base established there, so I know,
Mm.
hey, let's bring this guy in, let's bring that guy in. A lot of them happen to be my friends and ex-college teammates and things like that. But in New Zealand, it's very similar. It's get there, see what the landscape is, and then target the best people. Like
Mm.
we were fortunate enough to go out and cherry pick. Again, like I say, the board had sort of changed their vision and said we want to build this youth space. So it was like honestly, it was like I don't want to say it was like a blank check, but there was never anything. They never said no to anything. That's actually what I liked about the board that I worked for there. It's sort of like, hey, like we're a bunch of guys that were passionate about this club, and with some of them played for the club when they were kids, and they're on the board now, and they're like, but we don't like we're not the experts in football. You are, so you say it, we'll back it. You go do it. And um, that was a big factor, just having their backing, um, to go out and get the right people, try and do the right things, and yeah, like I say, it snowballed pretty quickly.
Right. And so now if you, I know this was something that ended up happening abroad over in New Zealand, but do you think you would be able to go if you were tasked with doing the same general structure that you were able to succeed in over in New Zealand? Do you think you'd be able to do it in the United States or Scotland, or are there certain restrictions that you think you would have ran into if you had to?
Yeah, I think good, really good question. I've actually spoke offline with people about this. I think
Oh, you don't
look,
have to. We don't have to
no,
go.
no. So I mean, this
Oh,
is a conversation that's come up. Sorry, yeah, this is
mm,
the yeah. I think honestly, it comes down to just having like an open mindset. Um, a lot of people at youth clubs in the States, and I've been away from Scotland for a while now, so speaking on that would be tough. But in
mm,
terms of the States, like a lot of people in these clubs, they have a certain way they want to do things, and even a lot of the clubs, although they don't want to admit it, they'll have a figure at the top. It might be a director of coaching, a technical director, an executive director. but majority of these clubs are driven by a parent board who all have their own opinion, have their their own way they want to do things, and in my opinion, that's why they never get done. There was the open mindedness of the board in New Zealand was just incredible for them to say, "Hey, we trust you. Take us where we want to go." And how do we get there? Who do we need on the bus? Who do we need to get off the bus? These kind of things I'm talking the positives when we're in New Zealand about the people we brought in. There is a flip side of that. There are people unfortunately you need to get off the bus. And again, if I tie it back to the United States, um, some people in these organizations might have good relationships with board members and things like that. So it's tough to move people on that just might not be the right fit for your organization. But ultimately, sometimes you have to sort of clean house when you get to a place.
Right. No, very interesting. And that ends up becoming the reality of trying to find advancement. There needs to be certain decisions that not everyone may agree with or may not be the most agreeable for, one or two people, but they ultimately end up being that if they end up looking like the right decision, you end up moving forward and you do with said decision that you can. And if it ends up being something that ends up holding other individuals back and that ends up it just ends up being certain decisions that you need to make regardless.
No, 100%. I always compare New Zealand to the States because obviously I had some time in the States. Then New Zealand was sort of sandwiched in between, and then back to the States. And I think a big thing for me is what is the goal? So when I spoke to these board members, they told me, you know, we are failing because we are putting all our money, we're paying players here, and we want to develop youth. That was a key piece. They said we want to develop players that will go on and play for our first team. If they don't, they've just had a great soccer experience with us, and they'll be a fan for life or whatever it is. And a lot of these kids end up being that's their team, and they're loyal to their club. But I think that their main goal was how do we just make a great soccer experience for whether it's the elite player to the rec player, and how do we get the top end of the spear into the first team so that we're not having to put money there, but also it's not they're not sitting down and saying we need 1,000 players to pay $3,000 a year because this will generate this like that just there are it is becoming pay to play in these countries, but not as crazy as it is here in the States. And I I don't know if I again I'm but again just my opinion. Some of the youth clubs in America, they'll say they're about development and they'll say they're about this, but the bottom line is it always comes back to money. Like that's just about making money for some of these clubs, and that's the sad thing to me. And so, when I compare it to New Zealand, it was easier to get there because it wasn't tasked with we need this many kids to generate this much money to do this and do that. And to go back to your question, because you do it in the States, like the other barrier is a lot of these a lot of these clubs are just driven by revenue.
And it's difficult to even see it in the current state of how youth systems are, at least in the United States. And I will agree with you. I think I'm in agreement with you, at least with how some of these youth clubs operate. But um, I have a hard time believing, and maybe it's a pessimistic viewpoint in this, but I have a hard time believing that this will change until there's some sort of motivation to move away from this pay to play system. But I don't even know what in the world that could end up being without it putting more money in certain people's pockets and taking more away from players. And that ends up coming that'll end up having to be a trade-off that I think will come at some point. I just don't know in what form. I think there will be changes made again, and I'm speaking very vaguely on this because it's still something that I'm trying to wrap my head around, but it's going to become very difficult, at least with the current system moving forward.
Yeah, and I think not saying it was the answer, but and it's definitely not the answer, but sort of touched on it with Chad, and I talk about US soccer stepping in, some of the MLS clubs stepping in, and you're jumping down USL Championship League One. Like, I think not it's not going to solve the pay to play model like indefinitely, but these organizations could step up and offer and take the pay to play away. Because I can only think of um, not all the MLS academies are fully funded. You
Oh
know,
no. Mm.
like some age groups it's not pay to play, some it's pay to play, some they don't even have that age group. So yeah, there's not it's not like it's consistent across the board that every MLS club is offering 19s through 13s and those kids don't pay across the country. Like that's where it could get to and maybe should get to, and US soccer can maybe help subsidize this and plant flags in areas that there aren't MLS clubs and aren't other pro clubs, and maybe there's some sort of development fee in place that can help offset the cost and things like that. But yeah, no, I don't. It's a major problem right now, and I see it here at the ground level. Like there's kids not playing soccer that should be playing soccer. That's that's in its basic form. They're finding their way into like Sunday league games with men. They're talking 13, 14-year-old boys, that put in the right environment could maybe go on and do something in the game, but just they're being priced out, you know.
And so now, what do you think? I mean, what has your role with Northern Colorado at least shown you a little bit about this, or if there have been improvements within the organization, what, or at least with the time that you've been able to spend there, just making sure that these guys who are in and being able to be around the Northern Colorado Hailstorm, and I know we talked a little bit about the youth academies like that as well,
Yeah.
but what has tell me about some of the opportunities that Northern Colorado is able to offer, these youths in the I was going to say in the Northern Colorado area of Northern Colorado Hailstorm.
Yeah, no. So I think something I'm pretty proud of here is that we're actually, we have the pro brand behind us, but we're also like like I say, love it to be not pay to play, but the reality is we're not there yet. So we're actually coming into the market as probably one of the cheapest. No, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the cheapest in Colorado. Um, just trying to because I think there's there's been able to so you can charge your fees for players and you can operate and everybody can do well, but then there's just excessive fees that like clubs just charge because they can, and they be playing this league, so now it's 3 times the cost, and it's just like I say what I pride myself is trying to keep costs down for kids that we if we come in higher a higher price point, they're probably not playing soccer, and we're in a good area, we're a good catchment area. What Loveland, Windsor, Fort Collins, Greeley, like they produce soccer players, and a lot of the kids that if we were like I say a little bit higher in price, they'd just be kicked to the curb. So pride myself on that. I think the top end of that is obviously we formed a U20 team this year that played in the USL Academy that was made up of boys in the region from anywhere from 16 to 22 because we could carry a few overage players on the roster, and just provided what I think is actually a gap in the market. I don't know if you saw that change. So MLS, they switched it from, instead of it being 17s, they now have the 18s bracket. I always thought that there was a massive gap from a kid trying to. There's still a lot of development to go from 17, 18, 19, but we're asking players to essentially jump from uh, a U17 team to a reserve team, which would be take your pick of any MLS team, Rapids 2, say for example. I still think that's a massive jump. So the U20 league that we played in, it actually catered to a lot of these kids who were no longer in an academy setting, um, still young enough, and come in and played U20s for us, and we actually pushed 5 of them on into our first team, um, and kind of the unique thing about that is some of the places that I've listed in Northern Colorado. One kid from Greeley, which produces a lot of good soccer players, and another kid right on our doorstep, about 10 minutes from our stadium, Windsor, Colorado. So, yeah, proud of that as well. I think there's an area that um, the that isn't being serviced. I think that MLS switch to 18s will help, but there's still going to be kids that just can't make that jump to a second team. They maybe need an extra year or two, because essentially at that point you're jumping from playing in U17 to now competing with men who we chatted offline that may have been drafted, may have been bought for a fee. So yes, that's tough for a 17-year-old to do. So yeah, pleased with the program that we've put in place for, like I say, 16 to 20-year-olds, and that sort of sits at the top of our youth academy.
Right, and it really just speaks to the uh, to how operative and how well done really the academy system is at Northern Colorado. And uh, that being said, though, too, despite the what ended up happening in USL One, the academy is still very much going strong. Northern Colorado as an organization is not going anywhere. You guys are still going to be doing what you can for that for
No,
this.
no, 100%. Yeah, lots of positive things happening. Youth space, massive base under us right now. Some exciting things happening with our pro brands, men's and women's side. So yeah, no, you're going to be definitely hearing about it in the next couple of weeks. So yeah, no, exciting. And uh, I think I sort of cut off at New Zealand, but coming to Northern Colorado, like coming back to the States, like this is an area that, yeah, it's a hotbed of talent, soccer talent, and yeah, it'd be a crime to go anywhere. So got it. Yeah, we planted a flag here, and yeah, it can sustain from top to bottom, pro right down to the grassroots, like so
And I don't want to go too far in on, what could be happening next about the weeks. I assured that's you off camera, and I want to just leave that. I want to let the press release end up folding out on itself. I'm not looking for any breaking information, as
yeah,
we've talked about, we'd agreed on.
yeah,
Uh,
no, absolutely, I appreciate that, man. Yeah,
of course, absolutely. So, with even just by looking at, the past season with Northern Colorado, I mean, and the kind of professional talent that was there. I mean, Ethan Hoare, who I've gotten to have on for an interview many times, at least in the existence of this podcast, has been one of my favorite League One players of this past season, and
yeah,
so productive. Um, and just by looking at, um, you know, how how much were you really able to I'm looking more with your general manager role, but how were you
yeah.
able really to balance that with the academy director, more as we've talked about, a lot of it just being running around, but what did your role really entail as being the associate GM of a professional soccer club?
Yeah, so the academy stuff, it sort of it ticks along. A lot of stuff's done in the evening. Just sort of being the Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Um, just sort of being, for a lack of a better word, the right hand man of the GM. Anything he needed done in the office, lot of admin work. Did have the opportunity to step in and help Eamon and the first team staff from time to time with sessions. So that's always fun. Even you're mentioning Ethan Hoare. I remember we actually played DU in a preseason friendly. Yeah, he was. I think that's after that game. Uh, Eamon ended up signing him. Like, I think he played centre back that game, striker that game. Yeah, just good athlete. And obviously good player, and I'm sure he's got a bright future in the game. But yeah, and that is one thing I will touch on. I think the just being that point man between the first team and all our academy stuff has been it's one thing, like if I'm driving it, but a lot of it is driven from the first team guys as well, from like the head coach. It was actually Eamon and we sat down. Maybe I was actually working at funny enough, I was working at another youth organization in Northern Colorado at the time, and the Hailstorm was this big thing happening in Northern Colorado, new pro club, and actually I ended up getting an introduction to Eamon, and he sort of talked about want to build this academy, want to do this, and we sort of talked about how we might be able to pull what I was doing in the youth space, and then what he wanted to do with the new brand coming in, and we were probably back and forth for the better part of 6 months, and we said, you know what, he said to me, you know what, why don't you just come with us and let's build this thing together, and just from professional right down to grassroots roots, we've been able to build it up, and I think that's the key is having. Sometimes you have a lot of like I don't know, I say old school guys that might be managing teams that just getting by players, and I don't really believe in youth, but I think just sort of shows if we have players coming through, like the first team guys will be like Eamon will bring them into first team training, and we had a couple of guys make the bench this year from our U20s. Obviously, they're playing, they're making the bench for a team that just won the Jägermeister Cup and finished second in the league. So that just sort of shows like the talent pool we have coming through. So yeah, no, bright things, and I think that was sort of the mission. How can we have a program in place that's for everybody, but also, you know, if you're a 4 year old living in Windsor, Colorado, or Loveland, Fort Collins, Greeley, can you come into the environment? And if you really want to, can you go all the way? And a lot of the a lot of places in the US, it's not getting this way now. But you spoke about your hometown, a pro team just popped up in your hometown. Like
Yeah.
maybe in years gone by, kids in your hometown would drive 2 hours to go get that professional academy environment. Now they don't have to. Now they can stay, and also they can stay in the region. Don't spend 4 hours in a car, which obviously disrupts homework, disrupts home life, disrupts your eating habits. Like you can be a kid and still be an advanced athlete.
No, and it's all come about just being able to bring accessibility to all these young kids who
Yeah,
want to be able to play soccer at that highest level, and you're doing exactly that with Northern Colorado.
no, I appreciate that. Thanks, man.
Of course. And so, I know there's a lot that we could talk about with just over the past, but I wanted to wrap up this interview firstly just by thanking you for your time. It's been an absolutely very insightful conversation just about the role that you've had, your experiences ultimately leading to Northern Colorado at this point, trying to bring you know accessibility and coverage really to a Colorado base that's I think similar to DU in a sense, but you guys are really getting some of these players younger before at this college level. I've talked to DU staff and players and how they really play with this chip on their shoulder that no one really looks at Colorado like a hotbed that it really is, and you guys are doing exactly that on that academy level. But moving forward with this academy, where Northern Colorado may be in the future, where your role may end up being in the future, what can you tell me, about how exciting that these next maybe 2, 3, 5 years may end up looking like?
Yeah, no, 100%. Fun enough, you're talking about DU. I think they always say soccer is a small world. One of the DU freshmen this year, Keegan Kelly, actually played for me in New Zealand.
Yeah,
Um,
here.
yeah, he played for my club in New Zealand. So I tried to tap him up for our U20s this year, but he had already committed to a USL2 club in Denver, and
Mm.
he was fresh off the boat, and some teammates were going to drive him to the USL2 club down there. So I let him off the hook, but he's one might try and snag it for U20s next summer. But yeah, no, I think exciting times in Northern Colorado. Like I also look at um, I said earlier, it's a hotbed of talent, but I also look at the population growth in the area, the facilities growth in the area, like the there's just gonna be there's gonna be more people and more places to play soccer, and we have that flag planted that we can just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And don't get me wrong, not that the goal is to be the biggest, but it's just being able to increase the player pool and facilitate a good environment for more kids. And I think we're in a really good spot to do that.
Fantastic. There's nothing that I've heard throughout this interview that wouldn't get me excited about being a part of this academy moving forward. And Mr. Ireland, it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk with you. And I'm a lot of my own questions, but if there's anything else that you want to continue talking about, anything that I missed, feel free to call me out on it. But I'd love to talk about it now.
No, Daniel. Just want to say thank you so much. I know we've been connecting back and forward. I've been a big fan of your podcast and some of the people you've had on. So I really appreciate you having me on as well. So yeah, I love what you guys are doing in that space.
Perfect. It's all about doing our part to give coverage to some of these guys nationally, but it ultimately comes down to getting down to these little areas that maybe we forget about. Julio on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, but making sure we cover everybody and all our bases. So
Yeah,
I'd like.
no, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right, enjoy the rest of your day, Mr. Ireland, and we'll be in touch soon.
Same to you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.